everybody, Richard Blyle here on New Year's Eve, all alone. You're not really surprised by it. You shouldn't be either, because, I mean, look at me. What the hell? Anyway, as long as I'm alone and have nothing better to do, I'm going to teach you how to desolder. The last video I showed you how to solder. I had already stripped out my my wires and I was ready to go. Turns out you can desolder as well. It's the same basic process, but in reverse. You know, the soldering, what you're doing is you're taking metal and melting it onto the pieces of metal that you want to hold together. Now we're going to take something that's been soldered so that it is already being held together, and we're going to melt that metal and pull them apart. For example, my friend gave me her microwave because it wasn't working. I think something crawled into the microwave emission gun, honestly, and it was not worth trying to pull it apart. So instead I decided to take it apart and try to find that gun. And it kind of occurred to me, there's a lot of little circuits in there that I may want actually pieces from. Let's go ahead and clip some of these excess wires off because I don't need them. Get them out of the way. Now this particular one I damaged. You can see that it's broken here in the corner. So even if I wanted to use this, it probably wouldn't work because it actually broke through one of the solder points right there. So probably wouldn't work. I think it's just a power converter. This was where the power came into the microwave. Now often they put little circuits in things like microwaves that are designed basically to break. If there's a problem, if there's a power surge, if something causes damage, they don't want the more expensive circuits to be damaged. So they will put a cheap circuit in the front. And if there's something that causes damage, this is an easy and inexpensive piece to replace. And you can see that it originally had a fuse. It sat right here. So, you know, if it broke, you could take it in to be repaired. They could charge you $450, and all they'd have to do is refuse. Refuse. Yeah, they just take this and just undo it. Now, I'm not quite sure what this little yellow thing is here. Printed circuit board is usually only soldered on one side. These are capacitors. Capacitors are seriously cool devices, and I'm going to take both of those off of here so I can use it. I'm going to take the yellow one. This is a transformer of some kind. This is probably increasing the voltage from 120 volts as it comes into the microwave to something higher that the microwave gun can use. But you'll see that all of the soldering, all of the pathways are on the back. That's because a capacitor, the way a capacitor works is very simple. It's just two metal plates. Inside these little blue discs, there are two metal plates separated by an insulator, something that does not conduct electricity. And there's a wire that goes to this plate, and there's a wire that goes to this plate, and they build up a charge. And this charge is like a stored charge. This is why electronics are so dangerous, even if they're unplugged, because those capacitors, if nothing can discharge those capacitors, they maintain their charge. Very dangerous, because some of these capacitors can be huge. One of the capacitors I had in here was like 2300 volt capacitor. You don't want to put your tongue on a 2300 volt capacitor. So you have to be careful with electronics. Even if it's been unplugged, when you open it up, if those capacitors are charged, they can still do serious damage if you touch the wrong thing. In order to desolder, you also need something like this. This is a desolder gun. And what you do is you push the plunger in like this. There's a little hold here, and when you press the button, it comes out and it creates a vacuum here. Sucks that liquid solder out. That's all you need. So let's desolder something, shall we? Let's have a little fun. Okay. This capacitor right here, actually let's do this because this is an interesting piece. You can see it's soldered in here. Oh, the reason the soldering, I started to tell you this and I forgot. The reason these pathways are only on one side is because if you had pathways on the other side, well, if you have an electrical pathway on this side that happens to cross the electrical pathway on this side, you've just created your own capacitor. It's going to mess up your circuit. So usually these are only soldered on one side so you don't accidentally create capacitors that you don't want. Okay, so we're going to desolder this big beast right here in the middle. Notice that it is held together with this solder point and this solder point. These two solder points here. And are there others? Yes, there are. The other two solder points are these two here. Let's take it off. This is where you start the erotic music the dancers like to dance to when they are, okay, because they're going to strip it. It's like a joke. Just more offensive. Okay. So here we are on the back. If we can get it to focus. Come on now, focus. Follow my finger. There! Perfect. Now, yeah, this is what you want to focus on, but it's having trouble seeing it. But that's okay. This is like doing it farsighted. Okay. So, we're going to prime our little thingy here. And we're going to melt that first solder point, which I believe is this one. So all we're going to do is just touch the solder iron to it, get that metal to melt. It's not melting. Let me turn up my soldering iron. Come on, Meow. Just melt. Wow. I don't know what kind of solder they used here, but this does not want to melt. Oh, I guess I can't do this today. Will this one melt? Try this melt point. Well, I don't know what kind of solder they're using here. It seems to melt above 450 degrees Celsius though. Alexa, what's the melting point of silver?
The melting point of silver is around 961.8 degrees Celsius.
Oh!
763.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's probably why. I'll bet this is silver solder. Silver solder. Silver solder, which means that my little 450 degrees Celsius soldering iron, it ain't going to do the trick. But if I actually could melt it, then it would just be a matter of taking this. Actually, I'd have to leave this on here. And sucking the solder right out. Unfortunately, this metal seems to be higher melting point than my little soldering gun can get. So, the second option, actually, if I wanted to, which is not a bad idea, well, you have to be careful with things like this rubber foot here. If you took a hot air gun that could get a high enough temperature, you could melt it with that. Okay, so I can't demonstrate it, but the principles are there. yes, you can desolder things, and yes, if I could actually desolder this little circuit board, I would have some components that I might actually be able to use. But there it is. And this, being New Year's Eve, what time is it? It's 10 to 8. Here it's 10 to 8, which means that my friends out on the East Coast, it's 10 to 9. So, you know, a few more hours will be New Year's, and I wish you all a very happy 2024. And I will see you there, if I survive.